Okay, in Chapter 1, Section 2, we're going to discuss further the field of economics. And I mentioned economics is not only characterized by the subject matter that it studies, but also by the methods that we use. And one way to talk about this is the economic way of thinking. So in this section we'll talk about what distinguishes how economists think from how other social scientists think. And then we'll also talk about the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics, which is, I think, a pretty easy distinction to make. But the economic way of thinking is a little bit deeper of a topic. Here they list three characteristics of the economic way of thinking. I will distill them a bit for you. Opportunity costs are important. 1. 2. Individuals maximize. And 3, let me say 3, I will distill by saying marginal analysis. So the three main characteristics of economic thinking are opportunity costs are important, individuals maximize, and marginal analysis. There is one other that I would mention myself, and that is that economists look at the world through the lens of models. So, model-based thinking. And so what does this mean? Well, many times when we talk about problems in this course, students are eager to think outside the box and come up with creative answers to problems. In fact, that's not the first instinct of an economist. And so rather than saying think outside the box, sometimes I think about it as you have to actually put a box over your head and restrict your thinking about problems. Think of the problem through the lens of the model. At this point, it's hard for you to know even what we mean by models. We're going to see our first model in the next chapter. But when you look at, for example, what affects the price of oil, first think about the supply and demand model. And think about the factors that affect supply and demand. And think through the problem through the lens of a model. So I think that's the first characteristic of economic thinking, is model-based reasoning. Number 2 is really an assumption that we make about people. Individuals maximize. Another way of saying this is that individuals are rational. Some people, some social scientists in other disciplines think that is an unreasonable assumption to make. Sometimes people get frustrated and they do irrational things, right? So why do economists believe that people are rational? They think economists are wrong. Well, the answer is the people who make those critiques of economists don't understand the role of assumptions in economics. So we're going to assume that people are rational. I know actually that people aren't totally rational. But we're going to assume people are rational, and then we're going to see what predictions our model yields. And it turns out those predictions are often right. So it may not be true that people are rational, or that individuals always maximize. But it turns out if you assume that about people, you'll generally make good predictions. So that is one of the most powerful aspects of the economic approach. So we use models, we make assumptions, because the world out there is complicated, and it enables us to gain insight about how the world works. We already mentioned opportunity costs. So in the last video, so I won't give you any more examples of opportunity costs, but just to emphasize that many people do not consider opportunity costs, but economists insist on always considering opportunity costs, right? All costs are opportunity costs. What about marginal analysis? So here it says choices are made at the margin. This is not an assumption that economists make, but rather it is more of an emphasis. So economists emphasize marginal changes. Let me give you an example about decision making that is not marginal and one that is. So let's say you go to a restaurant and you're deciding between two entrees. The pasta marinara for $10 or the seafood fettuccine for $15. So the way that you might think about this problem of which one should you order, one way is, which is not marginal analysis, is to say, should I get the spaghetti for $10 or the fettuccine for $15? But here is marginal analysis. Am I willing to pay $5 more to get this dish that maybe I prefer more? Right? So you think about the additional cost and the additional benefit. And I think that will lead to more rational decision making in general. But generally, it's just an area that economists emphasize. Okay, so those are the main characteristics of the economic way of thinking. The next subsection of this chapter talks about the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. So microeconomics is the branch of economics that focuses on the choices made by consumers and firms and the impacts those choices have on individual markets. Whereas macroeconomics is the branch of economics that focuses on the impact of choices on the total or aggregate level of economic activity. In other words, microeconomics concerns individual decision making or household decision making, or as the name suggests, small levels, right? Refined aggregates, well, let me not use that term, but small levels, like firm or household or individual. Like, for example, deciding what to order at a restaurant is a microeconomic decision. But a macroeconomic decision, or rather a macroeconomic topic, would be one like, what's the unemployment rate? So the unemployment rate is the fraction of workers who can't find jobs. And we are slowly working back our economy, back up from a severe recession in 2008, when unemployment rates were in the double digits, and they still are in some places. We had like over 10% unemployment in California, and other places it was worse. But that's a macroeconomic question. Why sometimes economies fall into recession, whereas other times they're in boom times, this is a macroeconomic decision. I know many of you are deeply interested in those questions, and you find them fascinating. I want to discourage you, however, from trying to incorporate those types of questions into your case in point articles. Because we have another course in this department called Principles of Macroeconomics, and that is the course where we emphasize those types of questions. So this class is about microeconomics. As the name suggests, it just means we're looking at the small levels. Section 2.3, called Putting Economics to Work, you should read this because there may be some questions, online questions about it. But I won't ask you anything about it on the midterm or final. It's mainly just an advertisement for economics as a field of study. So obviously, I think very highly of the field of economics. I've chosen to become an economist in my career, and I teach economics. So even if I went through the arguments that they make, you would still say, well, you're probably biased, right? But certainly I think economics is a good major. My personal opinion about undergraduate education is that for many students, not all, but for many students, it's not necessarily the place where you should get highly specialized knowledge. In other words, I'm a proponent of the liberal arts and for undergraduate students. And so I think at this stage in your life, you should think about the big questions. How does the world work? Well, economics provides a lot of insight into that question, because a lot of what humans do involves consumption and production, right? So economics is what I think the most important fields of study if you want to understand how the world works. There are other social sciences that are also useful in this regard. For example, political science is important because governments and legal systems also have a big impact on how the world works. Right? But you can also analyze political and legal problems through the lenses of economic models. So economics is a good major, I think, because you'll gain this deep general knowledge about how the world works, as well as, I should add, some specific skills that are highly sought after by firms, including data analysis and analytical thinking. So I'll close this video by briefly talking about this case in point article from this section, The Financial Payoff to Studying Economics. This is a short one. And basically, it describes some research done by economists Dan Black, Seth Sanders, and Lowell Taylor. They analyzed survey data. There was a survey of 86,000 college-educated workers, and they found that economics majors earned about 13% more than other social science majors, 11% more than business administration majors, and about the same as natural science and accounting majors. We're going to talk about statistical analysis in the next video. This is the first time this type of analysis was mentioned in the books. I just wanted to mention it here. They do also say here, the researchers controlled for variables such as gender, race, and ethnicity. This is important because if you don't, and you find that econ majors earn more money, we can't be sure that it's really picking up the effect of being an econ major. And let me give you one example why that may not be true. Many of you know that on average, male workers make somewhat more than female workers. This is a fact of the US economy, probably most economies. So whatever the reasons for that are, let's leave aside. It also is the case that most econ majors are male. Not necessarily as male heavy or oriented as it once was, but as one example, there's been only one female who won the Nobel Prize in economics, and this was 2011. Her name was Elinor Ostrom, who was one of my favorite economists. Also, she was really a political scientist, but she won the Nobel in economics. Other than that, it's been all male. So economics is generally male-dominated field. Less and less so, but historically that has been the case. So if you saw that econ majors made more money, it could be because there are more male econ majors and males make more money. So it's not actually econ causing people to make more money. It's the fact that there are more males. Just giving you an example of why economists then would want to control for gender. And so say, let's compare a female econ major with a female business administration major. Right? That would be then a way of controlling for the effect of gender. Right? And there are various statistical tools that we're not going to cover in this class. I'll give you a taste of what they are, but you will learn them if you take more advanced econ classes. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight this here, not because I'm really trying to convince you to become an econ major. I think that you should, but I don't know exactly what your goals are. So I highlight this only to mention that this case in point article is an example where statistical analysis was used, and this is something that you might look for as you create case in point articles.